No, we'll do
All
part two.
right.
And I do have a few more question episodes, 30 minutes, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of good conversations here, a lot of good
Awesome.
content. All right, let's do this. Welcome back to Hello Henderson. We are back with Kristi Staab. Conversation's so good, we had to break it into two episodes just so you can consume it, you can understand it, you can learn how to live values first. Kristi, quick, tell us who you are so we can put your name and introduction on the screen.
Hello, Henderson, and hello, Hawz. Thanks for having me back. I'm so excited.
Tell us who you are one more time and what do you do?
Kristi Staab. I am a neighbor in community here in Henderson, Nevada. Been here 11 and a half years, and I'm ready to rock and roll, Hawz. Let's go.
Let's do it. All right. Let's talk about think values first. And let's talk about, because in the last episode, we talked about how it affects the community, how it affects families, the society that we live in. We covered some of the things we talked about where I said decorum, you said respect in the way we do things around our lives every day and society. We come to an agreement on a lot of things. One of the things that we discussed was the last thing we discussed was how do you break up with certain people that don't
Right.
service or serve your values or don't are not in line with your values. That, as a matter of fact, they go against your values. So, without rehashing that again, I do want to just touch on one thing, and that is family. It's easy for us to talk to younger kids. I have two daughters. I can talk to them about think values first and define those values instead of just saying, oh, respect. Respect what? For example, I said, respect my boundaries or don't
Right.
lie to me when it comes to serious things. Those are the boundaries that I have for myself or the values that I have for myself and my family. But let's say somebody now hears you for the first time, Kristi, and they say, you know what? I want to start. How does somebody start? They're 30, 40, 50. Never too late to start something and to better yourself. How do they start?
Never too late. I love that you asked that question, Hawz, because what is so powerful about values is we have an internal, and this internal operating system is actually invisible to us. So, what we see out in the world is when we take a look at our life and we might measure we where we want to be? Are we stuck? Or are we headed in the right direction? Most people in self help and leadership will fall back on I got to fix my mindset, got to change my habits. I need to hustle a little bit more, and I've lost my motivation. So they start randomly going after one of those four things. Now, I'm not going to say that's not part of the equation. I'm going to say that's the part experts have been selling you for years that is more of the surface if done alone. These are things that happen that we can do. I can shift my mindset. I can hustle harder. I can look at my behavior or my habits. And because they're on the source, I could find myself in the same place I've been for 3 years, 5 years, over a decade, expecting different results. And when I'm not where I want to be, I could go, okay, I read an article in Forbes. Forbes article said, wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. So all of a sudden I start waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I'm not sleeping anymore. And what's important is while we're busy out there creating all of this and putting more on our plate, we're still not getting to the root or the foundation that drives every result in our life. And that is our values. If experts do talk about values, they don't get to the values part. That's the trick. So if experts tell you you're not getting the results that you want, look at your behaviors. Again, those behaviors are untethered. That's what I talk about. If you remember tetherball as a kid, that ball went around the pole, right? It was tethered, so that ball wasn't going anywhere. Our behaviors, when many experts go through, They're talking about, like I said, mindset, motivation, habits. They're not talking about tethered behaviors. So what you can do is you can trace the results that you're getting in your life, good, bad, or stuck, from your results all the way down to the values, the root or the foundation of every result you're experiencing. So take a look at the results that you're getting. If there's an area you're not happy, look right into your behaviors. What are those behaviors that are driving those results? What are the decisions that you're making that drive the behaviors that drive the results? If you take it from decisions down to beliefs and beliefs down to our values, because I mentioned in the first episode, you might think that you have those 5 core or 10 core values identified. I'm going to tell you they're probably more aspirational than they are lived. All the results that you're getting in your life right now are a direct reflection of the values you're living. So you can trace all the way down from your results to your behaviors, to your decisions, to your beliefs, and ultimately to the values driving those results. Kristi, I've now traced them all back, and I see I was looking for love at the top. I see that maybe I work, 80% of the week. I see that I travel for business 60% of the week. And when I trace all of that back down to my values, the values, when I'm looking for love, are achievement, accomplishment, and performance. Of course, you're doing great in business. Of course, you're doing great in your career. Those values are probably not going to find you the love of your life. So let's flip that around. You can build the results you want by identifying what the result is and then starting with the values that if you live those values consistently, those values can up the chain. The values, the beliefs, the decisions, the behaviors give you the results that you're looking for.
So I feel like you led right into my next question, which is where do you focus, not you, but the person listening to you, where do they focus and what is the one big thing that they should take from what you just said?
So I refer to it as the code.
Okay.
The code flexes 2 muscles at once. The first piece is self-awareness. In self-awareness, I say practice that muscle every single day, because when you are aware of where you are, it's a baseline from where you are, and you can create the baseline where you want to be and find that gap in the middle. So the better level of self-awareness, the more you're going to understand your results aren't working. The more consciously aware you become of your results, of the values that will get you there, the more likely you will be living your life by design and not by default. So I said you're flexing 2 muscles in this process. The first being self-awareness, the second one being values awareness. And I will tell you, many people have no idea which values they are currently living out loud. And many of those values, even though we have our list of aspirational values that we've written down and we hang on the wall or in our journal or on our vision board, right? Oftentimes the values that we're living are inherited values that we picked up from our parents years ago. So you have the 2 muscles to flex, your self-awareness and your values awareness.
It sounds to me like your body of work is based on life experiences and what you went through and how you got there. But someone would ask, are there studies around what you're telling us here? And I know there is, but can you elaborate on that? Can you tell us about the data and the science that backs everything that you just said?
So there's a lot of different values work that I do. This is probably the easiest value set that I have ever seen or done. And the proof is in the pudding. If you do the exercise, you're going to see very quickly the ahas. And here's the thing, Haas. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And values are interesting. I have done values where it was a pen and paper exercise and you would circle your top values. I have done values that are on a screen and it says, out of these 150 values, pick the top 10 you believe that you're living. At the end of the day, your lived experience is going to outweigh all of those. I'll use an example. People oftentimes select values that they're going to pick values that perhaps other people want to hear. When I was in broadcasting, we had people will select those values they believe other people want to hear. So they'll go through their exercises in their real lived life in real time, and they'll get to the bottom and they go, I don't have family listed. I should have my family listed. It does not mean that family is not important to you. If you think about your values as your priorities, when you select those values, those are the things that are top of mind for you in that given period of time. That is so important to realize, that it doesn't mean you don't value your family. It means that right now, these are the 5 things that are vying for your attention, if family isn't one of them. Or you may feel like, I've got family covered, right? These are some values that can stretch me in order to get the overarching result that I'm looking for.
That's really interesting, because I think we did talk about that previously. That is, you actually call out people for their BS answers when people say, oh, respect is one of my values. And what about respect?
And are you respectful? Are you respectful even when things don't go right? And here's the crazy thing. I said in the first episode, I said, oh, my coffee was wrong, and I yelled at the barista. Now I'm going to take this one step further. So people who haven't seen the first episode yet, they can look back after they see this. So last year, well, maybe it's been 2 Christmases by now, I was in line at the post office. Yes, USPS. I tell everyone, do you have any grand expectations of customer service at USPS? You shouldn't. And you should go understanding what they're going to deliver. It's consistent. Right? So I'm about 25 people back in line. The lady that's in front of the line is hamming it up with the people behind her, with all of the people standing in line, waiting for their number to be called, etc. And all of a sudden, she was being kind, she was being generous, she was laughing, she was communicating with complete strangers, and her number was called. And she turned around and faced the gentleman at the last window, which is where she was headed, and started screaming at him from the front of the line all the way to his window. And at the window, the poor gentleman was doing his best to deliver customer service, had this smile on his face that did not overshadow the tears in his eyes.
Wow.
And when I got up, I had the same gentleman, and I just said simply, you didn't deserve that. That was quite disrespectful. And I hope you'll continue doing what you do with a smile.
Wow.
And that's that moment. I can sit here and I can say, but Howza, I'm always respectful. There are times I've been disrespectful to myself. And it's that awareness to be able to say, I believe that leadership is a practice. It could have done better. Now, if you're saying that to yourself too often, you might not be listening to the self-awareness and doing anything about it. I think seeing that difference, though, I'm living respect or I'm living disrespect, it puts a whole other look and choke in the throat. Like, how am I showing up?
I say this often on my other show, and I say this often in my practice where I teach Agile and I help businesses transform, and I cover Agile values, by the way, and principles and whatnot. They're a lot more along the line of what you're saying. It's not just one word. It's a full sentence to explain. For example, if you're going to say that you're going to do something, why are you doing it and what's the benefit of it? But one of the things I often tell people is, let me ask you first. I'd rather ask you, do you need a title next to your name to be a leader or display leadership?
You do not. And I'll tell you one of
Now we're best friends.
one of the most cathartic experiences of my whole life was I gave myself a little gap in between when I left corporate America and started my own business. And it was an identity awareness because at the time I was 39 years old. And the very first question people ask you after your name is, what do you do for a
What
living?
do you do? Yep.
And so after 19 years of corporate America, and that's where I got my nickname, Chief Rockstar, by the way, I realized very quickly when you say I'm retired, people lean in. Because I was 39 years old, I was taking time off. What do you do for a living? I said, I'm retired. How did you retire at 39? I left my job. It's so interesting how some people value their identity to the point where their identity becomes a title. And at the end of the day, I had a big role that I played down in the Phoenix metro area during the Great Recession. I don't know who gets to call these things like a recession great. However, that's the name of it. I was working with many people who had been displaced from mid to senior level leadership. And I saw the identity crisis that people went through.
Look at that. We just went full circle going back to the first episode where you said be not just mentioning the four agreements, but saying be your best, being at your best. Stop with the complacency. Stop saying they're like, I got a C, that's good enough for me. No, do better. You can do better because you're capable of doing better. I like that. I like that a lot because your excellence or your perfection or your normal or your mediocre could mean something else for someone else. You made me think of a couple of things, but I don't want to steer away too much from the conversation, but I'd be remiss if I don't bring this up real quick. That is, one of my friends actually wrote a book, and I just finished reading it. The name of the book is The Accidental Mentor, and it's by Dr. Jeff Camp. In the book, it's a story. It's a fictional story about somebody who starts a mentorship program, and one of the people that came up to him she was panicking about her job, and he said, well, just do your best. Don't just do enough for you to get by. Do your best, because if it's not this job, it's going to be another job that's going to recognize the work that you've done, and you're going to appreciate the work that you've done on yourself to continue doing better. I think that goes back to society, decorum, everything that we talked about last episode and the beginning of this episode, how people just, okay, you took a job because you needed a job. We get that. But there's an acceptance. There's a certain level of expecting of you to perform at that job. If it's customer service, if it's a waiter, if it's somebody standing behind the podium at the U.S. Post Office, there's a way that we expect to be treated when we come there. I feel like that's actually two things that are very missing in today's society, not just as a community, but I'm just saying society in general. Empathy and consideration, being considering and having empathy. You heard me say earlier, decorum. I think decorum, it falls or encompasses the lack of empathy and consideration. Personal note, we keep speaking about Matthew McConaughey on this show more than once. I actually read his book last year, Green Light. I used to think of Matthew McConaughey as this fun, would love to have him for dinner sometimes or whatever. But now, after I read his book, wow, like this guy is, hey, Matthew, more than welcome to come on the show anytime you want. Matthew, now you got to come. I mean, we put it out in the world last year that we got to get Mayor Romero on the show, and she did. Now we're calling out Matthew McConaughey. Let's go. I'm putting it out there in the world. All right, Henderson, that'll do it for us for this second episode with Kristi Staab. Think values first. Thank you again for being on the show. Remember to like, subscribe, share, comment. If you like anything that you heard today or the last episode, comment below and we'll make sure we put you in touch with Kristi or email Kristi directly. If you know Matthew McConaughey, please tell him to come on the show. We'd love to have him on the show. We just want to have a quick conversation. That's all. He seems like a really cool guy. All right. That will do it for us today. This is Howza, and this is Deadspin Radio.
I
My
too.
introduction to Harry Carey was Will Ferrell. So I only know how to impersonate Harry Carey via Will Ferrell. I can only do an impersonation of Will Ferrell impersonating Harry Carey. Sorry.
Like
Hi. That's it.